Students, so we are once again back to our Merchant of Venice. For some time we had left drama for the sake of prose and poetry, and we are back to the scene 2, which the last part of it. Okay, I think with this we will complete scene 2 of Act 3, and we had reached actually Bassanio chooses the correct casket, and then we know how successful he was in selection of the right casket. And then we come to know about the speeches of Portia and Bassanio. And then Nerissa greets them, wishes them with great joy. Thereafter, Graziano speaks some hidden agenda of theirs, isn't it? Well, Bassanio wooed Lady Portia, Graziano wooed her lady in waiting, Nerissa. And however, the promise that Graziano received from Nerissa was that Nerissa would love Graziano provided that Bassanio had the good fortune of winning the love of Portia. And then the game of this play come to its climax. And here the Graziano Nerissa episode has added humor to the story. The romance and marriage of Nerissa and Graziano strengthened the old belief that characters in association with the nobility are themselves ennobled. Graziano experienced the joy of love in the company of Bassanio, and the other side, who experiences the same? Nerissa, isn't it? Nerissa, being educated by her mistress Portia, was able to win a gentleman's love. Now, Graziano, with a keen sense of humor, arouses much mirth and laughter in the scene. And then comes one more couple. Who are they? Lorenzo and Jessica. They are united when Jessica elopes with his father Shylock's money and jewels. And Shylock loses the case against Antonio, and Jessica gets half the share of Shylock's wealth in the later scene. Okay. And now we come to know somebody more are entering into the scene. Who are they? As said earlier, Lorenzo, Jessica, and one more, that is Salerio. Okay, the scene is still in the taking place in the room in Portia's house at Belmont, and Salerio brings the letter from Antonio to Bassanio. Now let's read the text. What happens? How Portia stands by Bassanio at this time of crisis. The real Christian virtue of a good wife being portrayed by Portia at this crisis time of Bassanio, where he needs to be loyal to both his wife as well as to his bosom friend Antonio. And how divided he become, but how Portia unites him back to his friend. Okay, the support, guidelines, and the presence of mind with which Portia acts at this moment of distress and pain of her husband. So we go through the text, children. Hope all of you have the text with you. Please take the text. Now, Lorenzo and Salerio welcome hither. This is said by Bassanio while when Lorenzo, Jessica, and Salerio enters to the mansion of Portia. Now they are all in the house of Portia in Belmont. So Bassanio speaks here. Lorenzo and Salerio welcome hither. If that the youth of my new interest here have power to bid you welcome, by your leave, I bid my friends and countrymen, sweet Portia, welcome. Now, see the expression of the nobleman. He says, the youth of my new interest means my newly acquired claim of the master of this house. Okay, now this mansion of Portia belongs to him. Okay, so yet he says, with your permission. By your leave means with your permission, let me bid welcome to my friend and countryman. Who is his friend? Salerio and Lorenzo and Jessica are the countrymen. So do I, my lord. They are entirely welcome. So she joined her husband in welcoming the guests. Lorenzo, I thank your honor. For my part, my lord, my purpose was not to have seen you here, but meeting with the Salerio by the way. He did entreat me, past all saying nay, to come with him along. Now Lorenzo speaks. He says, I had no any plan to come over here, but my purpose was not to have seen you here. I didn't have any purpose to come over here and meet you. But what made it? But meeting with Salerio by the way. I met Salerio on the way. He did entreat me. He encouraged me, or he asked me past all saying nay to come with him along. Although I made all kinds of excuses, in spite of all the arguments, on the contrary, I abided with the entreatment. Okay, by the request of Salerio, I came along. To this, what Salerio says, I did, my lord. So he says, yes, I entreated, I forced him to come along, and I have reason for it. Signor Antonio commends him to you. Now, what does he says? Commends him here means he sends his greeting. Salerio says the purpose of his coming is to bring greetings from Antonio. Now, but to this Bassanio says, what is Salarino hands over the letter to Bassanio, and then Bassanio says, ere I open this letter, before I open this letter, I pray you tell me how my good friend doth. Now he could feel some kind of fishy, okay, some kind of things are happening there. He understood some wrong things are being part of Antonio now. So he asked how my friend Antonio is. He's troubled at heart already. He knew something worse has happened with Antonio, his bosom friend. Salerio, not sick, my lord, unless it be in mind. So he says physically he is not sick, but maybe mentally. Okay, he is not physically sick, but he is mentally troubled. Nor well, unless in mind. So even in the mind he is unwell. His letter there will show you his estate. Estate means condition, his financial fortune. This letter will let you know of what his financial condition is right now. Now Bassanio reads the letter. While reading the letter, Graziano says, Nerissa, cheer yon stranger, bid her welcome. Your hand, Salerio, what's the news from Venice? Now, Graziano acts upon the scene. He says to Nerissa, now take care of the guest. He wanted Jessica to feel at home. So he asked Nerissa to take care of Jessica. And then he says, your hand, Salerio means give me your hand for a handshake. So he wanted to welcome Salerio to the house. How doth that royal merchant good Antonio? I know he will be glad of our success. We are the Jasons. We have won the fleece. Now here again the reference to that golden fleece won by Jason. Okay, you must be recalling how Jason has fought and won the flea. This is a mythological reference. Okay, now how doth that royal merchant good Antonio? So he, Graziano is still in his mirth and without any kind of worry. It's only Bassanio who knows the depth of the difficulty with which Antonio is living. And he says, Graziano as usual, cheering up the group, he says, Antonio must be happy now of our success in wooing both Portia and Nerissa. To the Salariuses, I would you had won the flea that he hath lost. You won the flea for which Antonio has lost. Okay? For in order to give you the victory, he has to lose the game. Meaning, it is at the cost of Antonio you have won the game. You have won the success. To the Sposiuses, there are some shrewd contents in yon same paper that steals the color from Bassanio's cheek. Some dear friend dead, else nothing in the world could turn so much the constitution of any constant man. What worse and worse? With leave, Bassanio, I am half yourself, and I must freely have the half of anything that this same paper brings you. Now, Portia acts upon, she says, for a constant man, nothing would trouble you other than the death of a dear friend. So, from the way Bassanio expressed himself, the change of color in Bassanio, Portia concludes that there is some bad news in the letter, because as soon as Bassanio reads the letter, his face turns pale and he becomes greatly agitated, greatly troubled, mentally agonized. According to Portia, the bad news in the letter must be about the loss of someone loved by Bassanio. That was the conclusion of Portia. And Portia begs of Bassanio to tell her the cause of his sorrow, as she and Bassanio are one. Now, she says we are one by way of marriage, by way of a promise to marriage, we are one. And she ought to share in everything that happens to him. Hence, she asks Bassanio to tell her what news that letter has brought. Beautifully, she says, I must freely have the half of anything that this same paper brings you. Be it fortune, be it misfortune, I must have the share. So she is willing to support or be part of Bassanio's sorrow. The real partner of life. In the Christian communities, while the marriage rituals take place, children, there is a beautiful ceremony in which the both partners says, in happiness and sorrow, in health and ill health, in richness and poverty, in fortune and misfortune, that they remain one, that they remain united. And she repeats the same lines by saying, the half of your sorrow is mine too, and whatever this letter has brought, I wish to share. And to this Bassanio says, O sweet Portia, here are a few of the unpleasantest words that ever blotted paper. Gentle lady, when I did first impart my love to you, I freely told you all the wealth I had ran in my veins. I was a gentleman, and then I told you true, and yet, dear lady, rating myself as nothing, you shall see how much I was a braggart. Braggart means was exaggerating my position. I was boasting of my position. When I told you my state was nothing, I should then have told you that I was worse than nothing. So he tells that I was nothing. Okay? Ran in my veins means it was in my blood. I knew that I was nothing. I had nothing. I had no resources. I was honest in confessing you that I had nothing with me when I came to woo you. That I was worse than nothing. For indeed I have engaged myself to a dear friend. And now I am bound to a dear friend. I am bound to a dear friend. To have some fortune, okay? Engage my friend to his mere enemy. That too, I bound my friend to an enemy. To feed my means. To get the money I needed. To To get my need, I engaged my friend to his own enemy. I bound my friend to his own enemy. Who is that enemy? Shylock. Here he is telling my friend Antonio had to be bound to his own enemy Shylock for my reason. To get money for my need. The paper as the body of my friend, and every word in it a gaping wound. Okay, a gaping wound issuing life blood, but it is true, Salario. Now, what does he say? This letter, the paper, as the body of my friend, and every word in it a gaping wound issuing life blood. Issuing life blood means from which his life blood pours. It creates a gaping wound. It is hurting me in such a way that even the life blood pours out of that wound. And every word in this letter hurt me so much because I know that this letter brings a bad news that Antonio is going to lose his life for my sake. Had all his ventures failed, what not one hit? From Tripolis, from Mexico and England, from Lisbon, Barbary and India. And not one vessel escaped the dreadful touch of merchant marrying rocks. Now, out of great agony, he asked. Antonio had not only one ship, but many ships to different directions. One to Tripolis, another to Mexico, and yet another to England, Lisbon, Barbary, and India. And everything got lost. He wanted to know, was none of his sheep could reach in time to pay the debt. Merchant marrying rocks means rock that ruin the merchants. Okay, the rocks that ruin the merchant, that lead the ship to wreck. To the Salario says, not one, my lord. Besides, it should appear that if he had the present money to discharge the due, he would not take it. Never did I know a creature that did bear the shape of man, so keen and greedy to confound a man. He plies the duke at morning and at night, and doth impeach the freedom of the state. If they deny him justice, 20 merchants, the duke himself, and Magnificus of greatest port, have all persuaded with him, but none can drive him from the envious plea of forfeiture of justice and his bond. Now Salario is telling what is the state of Shylock and how he is reacting to the situation. Shylock was showed him as a very greedy man who could destroy another man for the sake of money and revenge. And he could he be in the shape of a man? A man cannot be that cruel. And he says, so 20 merchants, the duke and the noblemen could not persuade him to give up his revengeful claim of the bond. Therefore, even if Antonio had sufficient money, Shylock would not accept it because his aim was to inflict pain on his enemy, that is, Antonio.